Hi, I'm Margie, and today I'm going to be showing you all the books that I read in 2022. In 2021, I read 19 books, and at the time that was a really big deal for me. That was the most books I'd ever read in a year. This year, I read 90 books. 90. That's insane. So I have them all. I'm just going to go through them in the order that I read them, tell you a bit about some, and just move right past others. And hopefully this video won't be too horribly long. So let's just get started. The first book I read this year is actually inside this book, because this book has 3 books in it. The first book I read this year was Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. I read Pride and Prejudice back in 2021, and it was good, but I honestly like Sense and Sensibility better. I feel like it's one of the Jane Austen novels that's not talked about as much as the others, but I highly recommend it. Also, the movie adaptation is really good. Second book of the year, coming in strong. One of, if not my favorite book of the year. This book is so good. I think if I could recommend any book from this entire video, I would recommend The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. I cried reading this book. There's like tear stains on towards the end. It's the first book I ever tabbed. When I worked at the bookstore, I would recommend this book to everybody. I love this book. It's one of my favorite books of all time. The third book I read in January was You'll Be the Death of Me by Karen M. McManus. The book that kind of made me fall in love with reading again was One of Us is Lying by Karen M. McManus. So even though her books aren't exactly my usual genre anymore, I still feel like I owe it to her to read every book she comes out with, and they're still a fun time. This book's pretty good. I don't want to talk about this book. Normal People by Sally Rooney. I so badly wanted to love this book, and I just did not. There is some beautiful writing and a good story in here. I just didn't love it as much as everyone else does. Fifth book of the year, Cloud Cuckoo Land by Anthony Doerr. If you recognize that author's name, he wrote All the Light We Cannot See, so I was excited to read another book by him. This is the longest book I read this year. It's over 600 pages, but there's a lot of different stories going on and different point of views. It's oddly fast-paced to be such a long book, and it doesn't really get boring. Okay, last book for January is The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. This is the first book in the Folk of the Air series. I love the Folk of the Air series. This isn't my favorite out of the 3, but it's still a great book. Okay, February. Started February off with Blood and Honey by Shelby Mahurin. This is the sequel to Serpent and Dove, which I read in 2021. Out of the 3 books in this series, this is definitely not the best one. It's a little boring at times and it kind of gets a bad rap, but I don't think it should get as bad of a rap as it does. Okay, here's another favorite of the year. The Secret History by Donna Tartt. There was a line in this book that, I kid you not, literally had me staring at the wall for 10 minutes with my mouth open, and no book has ever made me do that. This is definitely a book that everybody should read. This is also one of my favorites from the year and one of my favorites of all time. The Hobbit by Tolkien, of course. This book's also just really pretty because it has illustrations in it. It's like reading a nice little fairy tale, so everyone should read this book. Alright, continuing with Folk of the Air. The Wicked King and the Queen of Nothing. The Wicked King's probably my favorite from the series, but the Queen of Nothing's also really good. This is just a really fun series. I really love these characters. Alright, The Inheritance Games by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. If you enjoyed Knives Out, you'll probably like this book. Just a fun little YA mystery. The Red Queen by Victoria Aveyard. I have feelings. This book itself is good. Fun plot twist. Good book, but I'll explain more later in the video. Continuing with the Serpent and Dove series, Gods and Monsters. This is the final book in the series. This is a cool copy because it's a signed first edition, so it has Shelby Mahurin's signature in it. I can't decide if I like it or Serpent and Dove better. This one just has some like really complex writing and just like the mindset I feel like the author had to get in to write some of these. It's just really cool writing and storytelling, so I really like this one. Okay, Madeline Miller, Circe. This is a lovely book. This is a beautiful book. Continuing with Madeline Miller, Song of Achilles. It is very hyped up, and I think it deserves most of the hype. This is a beautiful book. You're just so happy at the beginning, and you feel it coming, and then it hits, and it's so sad and so beautiful. If you couldn't tell already from Folk of the Air and Serpent and Dove, I really started getting into fantasy this year, and fantasy is definitely my favorite genre. That is something I discovered this year. So I started the Grishaverse, starting with Shadow and Bone, of course. These books feel like movies. They're just written so well, and it's just kind of a fun universe to immerse yourself in. Alright, the last book of February was also from Folk of the Air, except it's kind of like a sequel, I guess, but it's a little like book of short stories that looks like just like this beautiful storybook. If you enjoyed the Folk of the Air series and you haven't picked up How the King of Elfhame Learned to Hate Stories, you definitely should. I wanted to spend some more time with Cardan and Jude, and this is just so fun. Okay, so I'm editing and I realized I made a mistake. So the next two books I'm going to talk about are Siege and Storm and Ruin and Rising, but I accidentally talked about them in the reverse order. So when I'm talking about Ruin and Rising, I'm meaning to be talking about Siege and Storm and vice versa. Alright, moving on to March. Continuing in the Grishaverse, specifically the Shadow and Bone series of the Grishaverse, I went on to Ruin and Rising. Nikolai Landstov. Nikolai is probably my favorite character from the Shadow and Bone part of the Grishaverse. This one might be my favorite out of the three, Shadow and Bone. And then Siege and Storm. It's been a while, so I can't really differentiate these books. They all kind of meld together. I should probably pull up Goodreads to make sure I'm not missing anything. Oh, I should mention that my Goodreads reading goal for this year was originally 40 books, and I was like, I don't know if I can do that. But then I was like, okay, we'll make it 50, and that seemed impossible, and I read 90. Oh, speaking of which, you should add me on Goodreads, so I'll put a link in the description to my Goodreads, but I would love more Goodreads friends. This is the sequel to the Inheritance games, The Hawthorne Legacy by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. The third and final book in this series came out, which is The Final Gambit, and I haven't picked it up yet because since I read these two books like so early in the year last year, I feel like I don't remember enough to pick up the third book. If you've read The Final Gambit, tell me if it's worth it. Now we can talk about The Red Queen some more. This is The Glass Sword by Victoria Aveyard. This is the second book in the Red Queen series. I struggled with this book, but I just really had a hard time getting through it for some reason. I think it was probably just filler to the next book, but it made me stop this series completely. So again, I'll ask, let me know if I should give this series another chance and keep working through it. Not that it was bad or anything, I just got so bored and it felt like a chore to read. Alright. Oh my gosh, this series. I read the first book in this series. This is the Shatter Me series. I read Shatter Me in 2021. Didn't love the first book, so I was like, I'm done. But I kept seeing stuff about this series. I was like, let me just press on. And I picked this book up and I was like, okay, yeah, I get it. I'll talk a lot more about this series as we go. But one of my favorite books from this year is in this series. Okay, continuing with the Grishaverse and the second series within the Grishaverse, Six of Crows. This is a good book. A lot of people love this book. I loved this book too. I don't know why, the characters are so good, but I can't really remember plot points now that I'm thinking about it. I really think the Grishaverse is just all blended together in my brain. Oh, here we go. Best book in the Shatter Me series, Ignite Me. Such a good book. So good. This is oddly one of my favorite books from the year. Aaron Warner. Also the side characters in this series, like Kenji and his friendship with Juliet, and just what a series. Continuing with Six of Crows. Crooked Kingdom. Ouch. Sad. Painful. Anyways, Grishaverse is good, just as a whole. It's hard for me to rate the books individually because, like I said, it blended together. Oh, more Grishaverse. I didn't realize that there was directly following another one. We finished March. Crooked Kingdom was the first book of April. Second book of April was King of Scars. These books are so pretty. I had a good time with this because it was previously introduced characters, one of them being my favorite in the Grishaverse, Nikolai. So I enjoyed following Nikolai and Zoya. Alright, next, not a typical book for me, The Love Hypothesis. It's so weird to me that I didn't hate this because this is not my type of book usually. I read 3 Colleen Hoover books this year. This was the first Colleen Hoover book that I ever read. I have not been saying author names. Most of these you can look up and the author name will come up. I'll start saying them now. This is It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover, but I'm sure you knew that already. Colleen Hoover has taken over. Not to say that her books aren't good. I think I gave this book 5 stars. It is deeply emotional and deals with heavy subject. A lot of Colleen Hoover's books aren't really romances. They're dealing with these heavier topics and sometimes romanticizing them. So though I did read 3 Colleen Hoover books this year, I don't think I'm gonna be picking up another one of her books, or at least not often. I just don't think I want to continue reading her. I don't have a problem with anyone that reads Colleen Hoover books, and like I said, I read 3 this year. I just think I'm gonna stray away from reading any more of her books. But this was still a 5-star read. It was, it made me cry. I cried a lot. They Both Die at the End by Adam Silvera. This was good. This is a really easy read. It still kind of makes you sad despite it telling you what happens on the front. Maybe a little overhyped, but still a good read. Okay, and that was all the books for April. Moving on to May. My first book of May was another book in the Shatter Me series, Restore Me. I almost stopped after Ignite Me because you do have the option to stop after Ignite Me, but you can continue, and you should, because why wouldn't you want more Aaron Warner and Juliet? Sally Rooney returns. I gave her another chance because Conversations with Friends by Sally Rooney, Phoebe Bridgers wrote a song about Moonsong, and I love Phoebe Bridgers, and I love Moonsong, so I kind of wanted to read the book behind it, and I'm glad I did because I enjoyed this a lot more than I did Normal People, and I kind of picked up a little bit more on Sally Rooney's writing style. Here's what I learned from Sally Rooney, which I think is an important lesson to learn as a reader. You don't have to like a book to enjoy a book. You don't have to like the story to enjoy what the author's trying to do, and that's kind of how I feel about Sally Rooney. She writes stuff that is kind of shocking that you wouldn't expect. Anyways, love Phoebe Bridgers. This was a good book. Oh, sad. The Book Thief. This is also a book. Oh, I felt a little teary there for a second. This is also a book that everyone should read. It's a beautiful, beautiful story. I think everyone should read this book. This book made me cry. I watched the movie after I read the book. It also made me cry. Define Me, another book in the Shatter Me series. But you get the gist. Fun series. Love these characters. I think this was actually the first book that I ever read in one sitting. I sat on my couch and I did not get up until I finished this book. Okay. Oh, this is a really good one. This made it on my favorite books of all times list. It's one of my favorites from the year. My mom read it and she loved it too. Read this book, The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. So fun, like Harry Potter meets a Disney movie. It's so wholesome. It's like kids that are little monsters and creatures and they're like at this I don't know. Read it. It's so cute. Okay, ooh, this is a fun one. The Essex Serpent by Sarah Perry. This is one of the lesser known ones on this list. I don't know if you can see, but Tom Hiddleston's on the cover. And one thing about me is I love Tom Hiddleston. This year, Apple TV Plus came out with a TV show version of it and Tom Hiddleston starred in it, so obviously I had to read it so that I could watch it and watch Tom Hiddleston. And also while you're reading the book, you can picture Tom Hiddleston, so why wouldn't you? So initially I picked it up because of Tom Hiddleston, but I really enjoyed it. My favorite book of all time is Frankenstein. I love Gothic literature, and I was so surprised that this was written in 2016 because I felt like it was a piece of classic literature from the 1800s. That's just how it's written, and it's like just, oh, it's fun. And the TV show is good as well, so. Alright, more Colleen. This is Ugly Love, another book talk fave. I read this in one sitting. Again with the romanticizing things that should not be romanticized. It was still a good book, but like just, I don't know. I just have feelings. The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. My first Taylor Jenkins Reid book. This is a book that's hyped up that is worth the hype. Read this in one day, cried, whole event. It's a whole thing. I love how Taylor Jenkins Reid writes her literary fiction and how all of her books kind of connect together. The Particular Sadness of Lemon Cake by Amy Bender. I worked in a bookstore for a year and a half, and this is one that I would always walk past and the title would just grab me, and I picked up this book solely based off of that. It was okay. I had higher hopes for it. It was fine. It was a short read. Concept for the book is really cool though. This is Fable by Adrienne Young. Picked this up originally for it and its sequels. Pretty matching covers. I love a piratey story. If you know me and you used to watch this YouTube channel, you know I love pirates, because Once Upon a Time was so near and dear to my heart. Good pirate story is fun. And a good redhead main character. This book. On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. I wanted to read this book for so long. It's definitely not perfect, but it's pretty dang close, so it was a 5-star read. Like this beautiful prose and like reads like poetry, and the ideas he presents like leaves your mind like spinning. There's some parts that I didn't love, but it feels wrong to not give it 5 stars for the parts that I did love. Last book in the regular Shatter Me series, not counting the novellas, Imagine Me. Again, not much else to say. Love this series. The Hating Game by Sally Thorne. I surprisingly liked this. Wasn't great. Wasn't horrible. Just decent. Okay, last book in the Grishaverse. Rule of Wolves. Nikolai and Zoya. Leigh Bardugo has just a knack for writing. Like this whole series was so fun. Felt like a movie. Such beautiful characters. Such beautiful writing. Okay, that was May. So let's move on to June. Oh my gosh, there's... I hate talking about popular books that I didn't like because I feel like I'm gonna get like attacked. My Year of Rest and Relaxation was my first book of June, and I had such high hopes, and I think everybody talks about this book and takes pictures with this book because it has a cute quirky little cover, and I wanted to like it, but it is a trip. It is weird. It's like kind of a cool concept, but I wish it would have gone in a different direction. There's like some good parts, but most of it's just like, what is this? So that's how I feel about that. Okay, this is an interesting one. Opposite of Always by Justin A. Reynolds. This book has been sitting on my shelf for years. Picked it up several times and tried to read it, but just couldn't get through it. But I really don't like having a physical TBR, so I just finally picked it up and went through it, and it was pretty fun. I don't love a time loop trope, but it was pretty fun. It really focused on themes of like youth and mistakes, and just it's interesting. Next I read Daughter of the Pirate King by Tricia Levenseller. Again, love a pirate story. Fable is a duology and Daughter of the Pirate King is also a duology, and they're both piratey. They both had redhead main characters, so they're very similar but different. And Tricia Levenseller, we'll continue on that on a later book. Love in Other Words by Christina Lauren. I think I gave this book 5 stars. This is my first Christina Lauren book, and I only recently found out last week that Christina Lauren is 2 authors under 1 pen name. We have The Summer I Turned Pretty series, so these are all by Jenny Han. Summer I Turned Pretty, The Summer Without You, and We'll Always Have Summer. I gave the first book 5 stars after I first read it. I don't know if it's 5 stars anymore. There wasn't anything I really disliked. They're very youthful. They're very young. They're very short. Easy to read, fun little summer reads. I watched the show after I read them. Another Taylor Jenkins Reid book, Daisy Jones and the Six. I read this in the summertime. I turned on my Fleetwood Mac vinyl and just had a good time with it. It feels like you're watching a documentary about the band. I'm very excited for the live action series to come out about this. So Taylor Jenkins Reid can write. That was June. Moving on to July. I think this is the month of the year that I read the most books. The sequel to Fable, Namesake by Adrienne Young. Again, originally bought for the pretty covers, but fun little pirate story, very similar to Daughter of the Pirate King. These next several books I read on my beach vacation and just loved. So I read this one on the way to the beach, The Summer of Broken Rules by K.L. Walther. This one's cute. If you're a Taylor Swift fan, you'll enjoy the references in here. Ladies and gentlemen, Emily Henry. Beach read. I love this book. This book's incredible, and after I read People We Meet on Vacation, also by Emily Henry, love. So good. I really love Emily Henry. I cannot wait for Happy Place to come out this year. Emily Henry is one of my favorite authors now. While I was at the beach, I also read The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren. Fun time. Christina Lauren writes a fun book. And then at the end of my beach vacation and on my way home from the beach, I read another Taylor Jenkins Reid book, Malibu Rising. Out of the 3 Taylor Jenkins Reid books I've read, this one was my favorite. I was surprised that it was my favorite out of the 3. Oh my gosh! Where the Crawdads Sing. This book makes me so mad because the whole time you're thinking, who did it? Who did it? And there's one answer that in my opinion was obvious, so I immediately ruled that out because I was like, that's too predictable. And then that's who it was, so I was a little disappointed. But the book's still good. It's a good book. Movie was okay. Yeah, I just am a little bitter. Every Summer After. It's a good book. It's a good book. I think I gave it like 4 stars, so it is a good book. But it feels like a copy and paste Love in Other Words with a few mixed around details. I felt like I was reading the same book over again. Daughter of the Siren Queen is the sequel to Daughter of the Pirate King. I didn't know that there was a sequel to Daughter of the Pirate King. When I found out there was, I was like, okay, cool. I can hang out with these characters a little while longer. More Emily Henry. Book Lovers. Book Lovers is great. I love Emily Henry. I'm going to read anything Emily Henry writes. I didn't love Book Lovers as much as I loved Beach Read and People We Meet on Vacation, but it was still really good. Oh my gosh, this is still July. I read so many books in July. Looking for Alaska by John Green. I read Paper Towns several years ago and vowed to never pick up another John Green book because I didn't love Paper Towns. But I'm so glad I did because this book destroyed me and it's very different. Here is a novella from the Shadow Me series. It's actually 2 novellas in one. It's Unite Me, but it's got Destroy Me and Fracture Me. I need to read the rest of the novellas because I love these characters. Funny You Should Ask by Alyssa Sussman. This is allegedly based on Chris Evans and a journalist. I didn't like it as much as I thought I was going to, but it was still a good book. Earlier I was talking about how much I love Tom Hiddleston, and I love Loki. Loki is my favorite Marvel character. I love Marvel. But because I love Loki so much, I didn't want to pick up this book because I felt defensive of the character. But I enjoyed it. I really love Asgard, so I enjoyed spending a little bit of time there, but I was really surprised where the setting of the rest of the book took place. But it's really fun, and I just love spending time with Loki because he's a comfort character of mine. It was nice to have that in book form. Also really added to the pain that I feel for Loki and his character development, and the hate that I feel for Odin. If you're a Loki girl, oh, I don't even want to talk about this one. This is the last book of July and the last Colleen Hoover book, Verity. Disgusting, like literally disgusting. There is no way to justify actions in this book, characters in this book, but like I said earlier, you don't have to like a book to enjoy it. I don't even think You don't even have to enjoy a book for it to be a good book. This book is disgusting and I kind of hate it, but the writing, the story, the manuscript versus the letter is kind of insane, but this book is disgusting. Anyways, this is the last Colleen Hoover book I might ever read. That just was like, done. Okay, and then moving on to August, Fellowship of the Ring, the first book in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Reading this series was really special to me because before I started reading, it was a book series that I was like, I want to read that, but it didn't like seem possible, and I read the entire series this year and I really enjoyed it, and it's definitely my biggest reading accomplishment this year was reading Lord of the Rings, but 5 stars. Tolkien, come on. I fell so deeply in love with Emily Henry's writing that I needed more, so I picked up one of her earlier novels, A Million Junes. It's got ghosts and touches on grief. I love Emily Henry. I want to read more of her earlier stuff. But if you like Emily Henry and you're wanting to like satisfy that itch, get A Million Junes. It's a little different, but I mean, it's Emily Henry, so still. Okay, one of the few nonfiction books I read this year, I read Liturgy of the Ordinary by Tish Harrison Warren. It's a Christian book and it talks about making practices in everyday life kind of sacred, and I used this kind of as a devotional this year and read it over like a week or so. Better Than the Movies by Lynn Painter. So much fun. And a redhead main character. More Lord of the Rings. The Two Towers. There's nothing to say. I love Samwise Gamgee. I love these books. Okay, this is the last book of August. In the middle of August is when I started college, so that's when my time started depleting. This is by Tricia Levenseller, who also wrote the Daughter of the Pirate King duology. The Shadows Between Us. So good. It's a standalone, enemies to lovers, fantasy, and it's so good. This is a really underrated book, and the writing in this book is just incredible. So if you're a fantasy person, if you want to go to YA fantasy, I highly recommend this book. This one's really fun. Okay, so that was August. For September, we have a singular book because, like I said, I started college and ugh. So my singular book I read over one weekend, and that was Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. I love the Bronte sisters. They can write so well. I love Gothic literature. I don't think I like Jane Eyre quite as much as I loved Wuthering Heights, but it's still really good, and I love the Bronte sisters. Alright, in October, I finished Return of the King, the final Lord of the Rings book. I mentioned Karen M. McManus earlier in this video, and she came out with 2 books this year, so I read Nothing More to Tell. The main character is a young journalist, and I'm currently a journalism major, so I enjoyed that. I liked this one a little more than the other one that came out this year. Okay, it is October, so I had to do some spooky season reads, so I read House of Hollow. Very disturbing, but a great spooky season read. Then I read And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie, which is a fun little mystery and a classic. Then I read Practical Magic by Alice Hoffman. I still have yet to watch the movie, and I need to. It wasn't what I expected, and there were some weird bits, but I actually really enjoyed this. Oh, my cat. Tom! This is Tommy. Hi, baby. He was left out. If you're anything like me, November 1st hits and it's Christmas. Growing up, there was a box set of books that sat on one of the shelves in our house, and it's a book series that a lot of people read when they were kids, but I never did. But I decided to pick it up, and I'm glad that I picked it up as an adult instead, because I feel like I would have missed the beautiful biblical imagery. The Chronicles of Narnia. So on November 1st, I read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, because it has such Christmassy and wintry vibes, so it kind of satisfied that Christmas itch. But I cried reading this book because the biblical imagery is absolutely beautiful. Okay, this one's kind of boring. Not boring. It's just that this is a book that I read for my Old Testament class called Echoes of Exodus. It was pretty good. I think I would have enjoyed it more if I wasn't reading it and doing assignments for it. Next, I finally started the Caraval series by Stephanie Garber. So pleasantly surprised. This was so much fun. Then I read Legendary. I liked that this one was totally Scarlet and this one was totally Tella. I liked having the different sisters, and I'm currently reading Finale right now with both the point of views, but I was really pleasantly surprised with these. These are really, really fun. Okay, now Christmassy reads. I read Always in December by Emily Stone. This shocked me. Like, I knew something sad was going to happen, but when it happened, I could not have expected it. I really enjoyed this one. Then I read A Christmas Carol. I read this in like the 6th grade, but it had been so long, and I enjoyed reading it so much again. Started reading it during December, read a good chunk of it on Christmas Eve, and finished it on Christmas Day, and it was just so lovely. This is another one that everyone needs to read. And then I read In a Holidays by Christina Lauren. I don't really like the time loop trope, as I mentioned, but it was cute. Christmassy. I read Prince Caspian and Voyage of the Dawn Treader, the next books in the Chronicles of Narnia series. My box set is arranged in the order that they were written, not chronologically, so that's the order I've been reading them. Prince Caspian was pretty good. I still gave it 5 stars, but not as amazing as Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Voyage of the Dawn Treader got 4 stars, still good. Just the biblical imagery. 2 more. Okay. Before We Were Strangers by Renee Carlin. This was a trip. Was not prepared for these plot twists. I was not expecting this book to go the direction that it went. It was kind of crazy. I read this in one evening. Last book of the year, going out on a strong note. This one's probably tied with Midnight Library for my #1 read of the year. So my final book of the year was The Picture of Dorian Gray. Never have I ever wanted to write in a book. I tab, and as you can see, I heavily tabbed this one. There was so much good stuff that I literally had to underline with a pen, and I hate marking in my books, but this one I absolutely had to. I had so many thoughts, and it was so, like, this book is insane. I love Sybil Vane, Justice for Sybil Vane. After I read that one chapter, I was a mess. I was so infuriated. I also love Basil. This book made me feel things, and it was so good and infuriating, and the last page was like, what? So anyways, this was one of my favorites of the year and a new favorite of all time. Okay, let's see if we can, like, just hang on. We'll stack it up because we need a thumbnail. So as I'm stacking these up, those were all the books that I read this year. I cannot believe I read as many as I did. If you want to see me trying to stack all these books up, you should go watch the TikTok I made. Okay. No, absolutely not. No. Anyways, thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know what you read this year, if you read any of these, if any of the ones I mentioned piqued your interest. Add me on Goodreads. But yeah, that's all. Thank you for watching. I hope this video wasn't too long. I love talking about my books. I'm gonna pick up this mess. Thanks for watching. Bye!